I want to welcome all our participants, panelists, and listeners to the webinar. I want also to be frank with our audience that I contemplated to postpone this webinar. However, the unprecedented conflict in Ukraine and military operations that take place near and around nuclear facilities jeopardize their safety and security, which makes our discussion today not only timely, but also necessary. As many of you also know, today the IAEA Board of Governors passed a resolution deploring the Russian Federation's actions in Ukraine. Given the situation and the continuing meetings of the IAEA Board of Governors, the IAEA Director General Grossi unfortunately will not be able to join us today and participate in the webinar. Instead, Lydie Evrard, Deputy Director General and Head of the Department of Nuclear Safety and Security at the agency, will offer remarks in his place. There are a number of treaties and conventions that govern nuclear security space. Among them is the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material and its 2005 amendment. The convention and its amendment constitute the sole international legally binding instrument requiring the physical protection of nuclear material and facilities. No matter how disruptive the current events are, the preparations for the review conference of the amended CPPNM need to go on. And we need to think how the review conference can advance nuclear security globally, regionally, and individual member states. In addition to DDG Lydie Evrard, we are joined today by two co-presidents of the amended CPPNM review conference, Ambassador Benno Laggner, Switzerland, Ambassador Suleiman Umar from Nigeria, as well as Ambassador Corinne Kitsell from the United Kingdom, Ambassador Morakot Sriswasdi from Thailand, and Tomas Bieda from the World Institute for Nuclear Security. I'm really delighted that we'll have such a broad overview and different voices speaking on the amended CPPNM and its review conference. And I would like to start it with giving the floor to Deputy Director General Evrard. Lydie, please.
Thank you, Elena. Good afternoon. I will deliver these remarks on behalf of Director General Grossi, who could not join today's panel, unfortunately. It was his intention to do so, but this week has been different from originally planned with a special Board of Governors. Please kindly accept his regrets and apologies. I would like to start by thanking Elena Sokova, Executive Director of the VCDNP, for the invitation and acknowledging Ambassador Corinne Kitsell of the United Kingdom, sponsor of the event. I would like to commend the work of Ambassador Laggner, Switzerland, and Ambassador Suleiman Umar of Nigeria as co-presidents designate of the CPPNM review conference. I would like to acknowledge the contributions to the nuclear security funds made by Switzerland and the United Kingdom, among other donors, that supported the preparatory committee for the conference, the PrepCom, and the forthcoming conference. Moving now to the CPPNM and its importance. We have arrived at an important milestone for global nuclear security. The IAEA is hosting the first conference of the parties to the amendment to the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material since its crucial amendment entered into force in May 2016. There are 128 parties to this unique instrument focused on reducing the risk of nuclear terrorism. Ensuring efficient nuclear security is fundamental to our ability to continue to benefit from nuclear science and its applications. This is especially important now as more and more countries look to nuclear power to transition to a sustainable, reliable, low carbon energy source. 31 countries are presently using nuclear power, and about 30 are considering, planning, or starting nuclear power programs. Nuclear materials are used in many other applications, including research and medicine. That means it is present in many places, including at power plants, universities, and hospitals, and the number of nuclear and radioactive material in the world is growing every day. It is worth considering the on-the-ground reality related to the CPPNM and its amendment. Let me give you some statistics in an area in which the convention and amendment are particularly important. When nuclear material is in transit. Each year, more than 20 million packages containing radioactive material are transported across the world. They travel by plane, train, ship, and truck, crossing oceans and continents. From 1993 to 2021, member states reported 630 theft of radioactive material to the IAEA's Incident and Trafficking database. Almost half of these thefts happen in transit, and in more than half of those cases, the stolen radioactive material has not been recovered. It is one reason why the universalization of the CPPNM and its amendment and their implementation across the world are so important, and we are working on that. The IAEA is fully committed to support member states with regard to the CPPNM and its amendment. The IAEA works hard and has had success in increasing the number of parties to both the convention as amended. On February 11th, Malawi became the most recent country to join the CPPNM. But to gain the full national and international benefits of the CPPNM, it's not enough simply to join the legal framework. It must be implemented. The IAEA provides legislative and technical assistance upon a state's request with the aim of facilitating adherence to and effective implementation of the CPPNM and its amendment. It provides training, facilitates peer reviews, and publishes guidance. The Nuclear Security Service publications, established in close cooperation with member states, provide reference guidance internationally recognized for nuclear security. I have said before that strengthening the agency's assistance to countries in the field of nuclear security is a priority for the agency. I believe more could be done to make us a real focal point in practice, not just in name, and to improve coordination among countries. The IAEA new Nuclear Security Training and Demonstration Center in Cybersdorf, for which we broke ground last July, will be a great example of us stepping up the practical training we offer member states in security, engaging the best experts and cutting-edge technology. But we can also do more by bringing together different players, including NGOs and think tanks in this area. The CPPNM is a robust and important legal framework. We have been working proactively to reduce the risk of a nuclear security breach that could cause harm or terror. We should not only be proud of our accomplishments in this area, but build on them. We must continue to be proactive. As more countries turn to nuclear energy, including countries on all continents looking to SMRs, the small and modular reactors, to provide reliable, low carbon energy. It's in all our interest to ensure high levels of security. In a world of exponential advances in technology across the board, from smart appliances to advanced communications and surveillance, we need to understand the ever-changing security environment we face and then adapt to it. The upcoming conference of the parties to the amendment to the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material is the opportunity to do so. At the first, since the amendment was passed, it will set the tone. Let us seize such an opportunity to bolster international security in an area where we have such an important common goal. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, DDG Evrard, for the message, and thanks to DDG Grossi for conveying his thoughts and for focusing on many important issues for nuclear security and for physical protection, including highlighting the continuing thefts and the plans that the countries have for expanding nuclear use, including both for energy and other purposes, and also highlighting the importance of the effective implementation of the convention itself, along with its universalization. And I'm sure many of us are really interested to hear how the preparations are taking place for the conference, some of the most recent updates. And I'm really delighted to give the floor to Ambassador Benno Laggner.
Thank you, Elena, for inviting me. And thank you also for organizing this webinar. Thank you to the United Kingdom for being a sponsor of this event. And let me also thank DDG Evrard and through her also DG Grossi for the excellent support that the Secretariat has been providing to us, the co-presidents, in the preparations for the conference. Now, I would also like to start really by acknowledging the work that VCDNP has been doing on the amendment to the convention. A year ago, you organized a workshop following a survey that focused on national implementation of the amendment to the CPPNM. And most recently, VCDNP also hosted, together with NTI, an online meeting which allowed for an exchange of views between us, the co-presidents, and the NGOs that will participate in the conference. Now, in my role as designated co-president, I will focus more on process than on substance. We are reaching the end of a long journey. In December 2018, a roadmap was adopted to prepare for the conference. There have been 3 stages in this preparatory process. In 2019, we had 2 meetings of legal and technical experts discussing how to approach in general the review in substantive terms and a number of procedural issues. In December 2020 and then at the beginning of 2021, we had a preparatory committee focusing on discussing a draft agenda and draft rules of procedure. And this PrepCom also decided to postpone the conference from the previously planned date in 2021, which would have been exactly 5 years after the entry into force of the amendment, to late March this year due to the pandemic, and also to allow for an in-person conference to take place. And I would really like to pay tribute also to a number of colleagues that have played a key role in the first 2 stages. Rob Floyd and Tomas Bieda, who is with us today on the panel, for chairing the legal and technical expert meetings, and Vilmos Cherveny and again Rob Floyd for chairing the PrepCom. Now, the final stage of preparations has been taking place under the responsibility of Ambassador Umar and myself. We started with a briefing on the margins of the General Conference last September, and since then we have been working on 2 tracks. We have had open-ended consultations to resolve a number of outstanding issues and to finalize the preparations for the conference. And in addition, we also had 5 regional meetings that were convened by the Secretariat to allow for a substantive discussion in a regional context. We also established an informal group, so-called Friends of the Co-Presidents, as a sounding board to assist us in our preparations. Now, the preparatory process has been challenging for a number of reasons. This is the first review conference of the convention as amended. We didn't have a template in the drawer that we could copy. Everything had to be specifically designed, developed, discussed, and agreed. Second, we also had to integrate very different expectations with regard to the conference. We have had a diverse range of stakeholders participating in the preparations, colleagues from capitals and the missions here in Vienna, diplomats and practitioners from regulatory bodies. And we've had to deal with the different legal status of participants. We have parties to the amendment and we have parties to the CPPNM only. We have adopted an inclusive process. Both categories have been participating fully in the preparatory process. And at the conference, the parties to the CPPNM only will also be able to participate fully in the deliberations. The only difference will be that decision-making will be restricted to the parties to the amendment. Now, nearly all of the outstanding issues that were left over from the PrepCom have been agreed. We still are now working under a silence procedure on approving the list of intergovernmental organizations to be invited as observers to the conference. We have agreed on the NGOs, on the rules of procedure, the agenda, and we are also working on identifying vice presidents. In substantive terms, we have begun discussing the draft outcome document, which will also be the focus of the next and last 2 rounds of consultations in the remaining weeks. The purpose of the conference is described in Article 16.1 of the Convention as amended, to review the implementation and adequacy of the Convention as amended in the light of the then prevailing situation. Parties will be able to express their views in national statements and in topical sessions dealing with all of the provisions of the Convention as amended. Now, besides the review component, giving an additional impulse to universalization is a key objective of the conference. The fact that the conference is taking place is by itself an incentive for further ratifications. This is also reflected in the rules of procedure, which will also allow non-parties to both the convention and the amendment, non-parties to attend the conference as observers and to participate in the discussions on universalization and also to deliver national statements. But to conclude, this conference will also, of course, be important as a contribution to advancing nuclear security in general. It provides a platform for a substantive dialogue on nuclear security. The discussions on adequacy and the prevailing situation will create a link to the current nuclear security context. For example, what are the threats that need to be addressed? What impact do technological developments have? The conference will be the most important multilateral nuclear security event since the last ICONs. And it will also be an opportunity to highlight the relevance of various instruments that can assist parties in implementing the convention as amended. So we look forward to having active participation in the conference in the remaining preparations, and hopefully also to have not only 128 parties to the amendment, but maybe 1 or 2 additional parties to the amendment as full participants when we start the conference in a few weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Laggner. I'm very pleased that you provided us such an overview of the modalities and procedures that some of them are still in the development for the upcoming review conference. Thank you also for mentioning some of the work that the center has been carrying out in the amended CPPNM realm. And before I give the floor to Ambassador Umar, I want to note that for those who are listening to us and viewing us either on Zoom, please use Q&A function for posing your questions. Those who are listening on YouTube, I would appreciate it if you send your questions to events@vcdnp.org. Ambassador Umar, I would appreciate if you take the floor now.
Good evening. It is an honor, a great honor for me to be invited to join my colleague to address this gathering on matters relating to the preparations for the upcoming 2022 CPPNM Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Materials, scheduled to hold here in Vienna from 20th March to 1st April. I want to also thank the organizers, the Vienna Center for Disarmament, and moderator of this forum for this opportunity to be part of this important event. Nigeria is deeply honored by such an assignment entrusted to me and my dear colleague and partner in progress, Ambassador Benno Laggner, the resident representative of Switzerland. The mandate of the presidency by the parties to the CPPNM was to work with the Secretariat of the IAEA in coordinating and organizing parties towards preparations for the 2022 conference in the same strength starting from October 2021. To date, a series of bilateral, multilateral, and regional informal consultations have been held. The Secretariat anchored and provided the tools and the resources needed. In carrying this assignment, the presidency was guided by the articles of the convention in the spirit of consensus and flexibility towards the 2022 review conference. We, as co-chairs and representatives of the parties, deliberated extensively and progressively to come to terms to some of the issues that we were able to achieve. Member states to the CPPNM were requested to share their experiences in the implementation of the instrument, the challenges they encounter, and then presuppose roadmap for the universalization of the convention, as well as their expectations at the scheduled event. Other issues relating to the preparation for the REPCOM 2022 included modalities of participation and limitations at the conference, and other associated administrative issues, the structure of topical session, rules of procedure of the conference, draft agenda, program of work, to mention just few. Many African countries participated at the consultation held over time, and it is hoped that many parties to the convention from the continent will share their views and experiences as regards the implementation of the instrument towards achieving universalization as the continent's utmost expectation. Nigeria has domesticated the provisions of the CPPNM and its amendment. Nigeria also designated the Nigeria Nuclear Regulatory Authority as the point of contact for the convention, and this has been forwarded to the depository of the treaty. Distinguished panelists, colleagues, Nigeria has also established the Center for Energy Research and Training located in Zaria with the sole aim of implementation of the convention and its amendment by ensuring and implementing physical protection regimes or measures for the NIRR1 research reactor using the recommended approach of the IAEA NSS 13, that is Nuclear Security Recommendation on Physical Protection of Physical Materials and Nuclear Facilities. Nigeria has again utilized the NSS 13 recommendation when transporting the fresh and irradiated fuel of the NIRR1 during the co-combustion of the NIRR1 in 2018. The regulatory body regularly conducts physical protection system inspections of the reactors. The challenges are not limited, but to other developing countries as well, especially in the continent of Africa. Some of the challenges include lack of awareness and involvement from the stakeholders, human and financial resources, that is, that of human and financial resources for the implementation of effective physical protection regime of the instrument and effective international cooperation. Nigeria is looking forward to a robust participation of the parties to the convention at the 2022 conference. And Nigeria hopes that all stakeholders and parties to the convention should be involved in the implementation of the convention. And we expect that all member states will explore cooperation at the regional and at the entire IEEA community. We thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Umar. Thank you for your efforts to work towards the successful review conference, and also for reminding us about the interest to nuclear energy, nuclear technologies and science in developing countries, particularly in Africa, and how it also important that these efforts go along with strengthening physical protection and nuclear security, very relevant to the discussion of the convention today. I will next give the floor to Ambassador Corinne Kitsell, and want to also thank her and the UK FCDO for sponsoring some of the work related to both peaceful uses of nuclear science and technology and nuclear security, including for this webinar that we have today. Ambassador Kitsell.
Thanks, Elena. And the UK is, of course, delighted to be able to support the work of VCDNP and this seminar. So I wanted to share some UK perspectives on nuclear security and our view on how we can use the first review conference to achieve what I think is our shared goal of strengthening global nuclear security. The UK is one of the longest standing users of nuclear energy, as colleagues will know. So for more than 60 years, nuclear's played a role in our energy mix. And today we've got 15 nuclear power reactors at 8 sites across the UK, and that's 20% of our energy needs. And we're looking at the next generation of nuclear power plants now. And of course, for us, nuclear energy will be increasingly important in efforts to combat climate change and to achieve the outcomes from COP26 and our commitments to net zero. And we also use peaceful nuclear and radiological technologies in many, many non-energy applications. And of course, in addition to the benefits we enjoy in the UK, we're also committed to ensuring access to them for other countries, as set out in the NPT, and you referred to our work on peaceful uses. And all of these applications and their benefits are possible because of 2 things. So first, the NPT, which of course guarantees states access to the benefits of peaceful uses. And second, public confidence. So confidence that these technologies are safe and that they're secure. And a criminal or terrorist attack or violence towards a nuclear facility that resulted in a significant radioactive release would shake public confidence deeply and really undermine our ability to continue benefiting from these technologies. So effective nuclear security is critical to sustaining access to the peaceful uses of nuclear technology. And actually, that's one of the reasons why we're so gravely concerned about Russia's unlawful actions in Ukraine, because it seriously endangers the safety and security of nuclear materials and facilities there, which are extensive. Not just power stations, but including in urban areas where we're seeing increasingly fierce fighting. And of course, this constitutes a serious risk to the population of Ukraine, to the neighbouring states, and indeed to the whole of the international community. It's also why we support other states to enhance their capacities to secure nuclear material, including through providing funding to the IAEA's Nuclear Security Fund, as Lydie mentioned. And it's why we invest in our national capabilities and implement robust legislation to meet our legal obligations, which are enforced by our regulator, which is a fully independent regulator. And nuclear security is a national responsibility, of course, but it can't be achieved by one state in isolation. So each state faces its own unique security environment. Many of today's security threats don't respect borders, and neither, of course, would a nuclear security incident which resulted in some kind of radioactive release. So, and as we know, the existence of global terrorist and criminal networks also means that effective nuclear security at a national level depends on effective nuclear security at a global level. And we must also ensure that our international efforts keep pace with rapid technological changes, both to address the security challenges and harness the opportunities that those present. And this requires countries to work together, to share approaches, to share experiences in addressing common challenges, and of course to assist each other and organisations such as the IAEA. And that requires a strong multilateral and legal framework which sets out the expected standards and provides member states with help in achieving them. And of course, that's why the CPPNM and its amendment and this review conference are so important to the UK. It's the main international legal instrument in this field of nuclear security, and this review conference offers an opportunity for states parties to discuss the amendment in a number of ways. And I mean, first, it allows states to discuss and share information on whether the amendment remains adequate in light of the changing national and global security context, and I've set out some of that. Second, it offers a forum for states to come together and share experience and expertise on how they implement the convention. And this important element strengthens global nuclear security, and it's also why this year the UK providing funding to NTI, the Nuclear Threat Initiative, to run a series of regional workshops, helping states parties to identify and address the gaps in their implementation. I think Benno referred to those. And thirdly, the review conference is an important opportunity to enhance the universalisation of the amendment. We welcome that parties to the original convention are also invited to attend the conference. We encourage them to ratify the amendment as soon as possible. And we also strongly support the active participation of wider expertise, including industry, including non-governmental organisations. And it's crucial that the RevCon makes the most of their unique insight and their unique expertise. And the UK was pleased to see that a diverse cast of external experts will take part in the RevCon this year. And finally, the review conference is an opportunity to agree a future review process for the amendment, so we can continue to ensure the convention remains adequate and up to date and to respond to future threats. And the UK would like to see a regular cycle of conferences following the model of other international conventions in counter-proliferation, and we'll certainly promote that position at this conference. And so I guess for all these reasons, the UK looks forward to playing an active role in this year's RevCon through our national statement and our participation in the topical sessions. And we're also pleased to be hosting 3 side events, which are focused on the security of next generation reactors, on cybersecurity, and thirdly, on how we can attract the next generation to the nuclear security industry. And of course, we encourage other states parties to play a similarly active role and look forward to working with them and with other partners to achieve a successful outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Corinne, and also so happy to hear that you'll be hosting some side events, including on the next generation and how to attract them to this field. Ambassador Sriswasdi, I would like to give you the floor next.
Thank you very much, Elena. Thank you for inviting me to join this important and timely event. It's an honor for me to join this high-level panel alongside with DG on behalf of DG Grossi, the co-presidents, Ambassador Laggner and Ambassador Umar, Mr. Bieda, and also thank you, Ambassador Kitsell, for supporting the organization of this webinar. Let me begin by giving an overview of Thailand and the CPPNM. We became a state party in 2018. We submitted the instrument of accession for the CPPNM and instrument of ratification to the amendment altogether on the 19th June 2018. The CPPNM entered into force for Thailand on 19 July 2018. Our national regulatory body, the Office of Atomic Peace of Thailand, is the main implementing agency overseeing the legislative regulatory works under the convention. For nuclear energy, Thailand is not go that far. We're still in the process of studying carefully for the use of nuclear energy. We see this upcoming review conference as important venue that provides state parties and stakeholders an opportunity to engage in a dialogue, review, and discuss the ways forward to advance the implementation of the convention. This will definitely be an important event for Thailand to take part in the first review conference since we have the amendment as a state party, which is also for the first time for Thailand to participate in the review conference. We look forward to learn from the discussion, from the exchange of ideas and experience of state parties. The sharing of knowledge and experiences would significantly help our implementing agencies, as well as the experts and stakeholders at the national level, to learn what needs to be done, to identify any possible implementation gaps, to review the implementation adequacy, as mentioned earlier by Ambassador Laggner, and to improve our implementation and better strengthen our domestic nuclear security network, taking into consideration obligations that we have under other relevant international instruments. We see that the outcome document is very important at this very critical juncture. The outcome document will reaffirm our shared commitment for the full and comprehensive implementation of the Convention's obligations. The outcome document will address the evolving realities and challenges as we see it today in nuclear security, the physical protection, and be able to reflect on how a state party like us will or should respond to these factors. It provides clear guidelines and recommendations on how to advance the implementation of the convention, as well as to promote the universalization of the convention. The outcome document, I think it will also help to reiterate the call for the CPPNM party to become the party to the amendment, as well as calling for states not yet party to this convention to ratify, to accede to the convention, underlying the importance of promoting universal adherence to the convention. The outcome document will not only emphasize the fostering cooperation, whether it's internationally or regionally, among states, parties, and stakeholders, but also provide a venue for further assistance and necessary resources to state parties, especially developing countries, in implementing its obligations effectively. Last but not least, The outcome document will highlight the linkage between the CPPNM and other instruments, such as INCSANG, which are mutually reinforcing and contributes to the strengthening of the nuclear security framework. For us, it is important what being discussed, reviewed, and decided upon during the conference be translated into action and at the appropriate level. The outcome document will reflect our commitment, as mentioned earlier, to the convention and our shared ideas, visions to promote the convention and the nuclear security agenda. Strengthening the global nuclear security regime requires global efforts and commitments. It is important that we build upon the REFCON takeaways and foster engagement and coordination among stakeholders in the nuclear security framework. For the IAEA, the agency has played a crucial and constructive role all along in the convention's framework. I truly appreciate the Secretariat for the hard work to support this preparation process through the Department of Nuclear Safety and Security, especially during the preparation process leading up to the Rio Conference. Thailand significantly benefits from the series of meetings and workshops, both here in Vienna and at the regional meetings, which have been organized to help state parties to get acquainted with the obligations and legal perspectives of the convention. The ongoing open-ended consultations chaired by the co-presidents designate and with the support of the IAEA as a secretariat is conducted in an efficient manner that could pave ways towards a successful review conference. The ongoing consultation is a very, very useful platform for us, especially, and I think for all parties to discuss on the essential preparation works such as logistical arrangements, procedure, and substantive works of the conference, text of the outcome document, etc. We wish to convey our sincere gratitude to the co-presidents, the co-chairs of the PrepCom, and also to the Secretariat. In this regard, the process will helps us a lot in preparing ourselves for participating in the Rio Conference. It's very significant learning process for Thailand as a newcomer. And we believe that the IAEA will continue to play its constructive and proactive role, both in terms of facilitating the Secretariat work of the convention, as well as in the technical assistance dimensions, such as the capacity building, the publications of related materials. The work of the IAEA would indeed be instrumental towards effective implementation and universalization of the convention. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Sriswasdi, and thank you for, I think, starting already conversation about the importance of the outcome document and expectations for the convention and the review conference, for the review conference. I think we'll return to that in the Q&A, but before I give the floor to Tomas, I would like to remind our audience to please post questions in the Q&A function rather than chat, or send them to events@vcdnp.org. Tomas, last but not least, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Elena, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. First of all, I would like to thank you and VCDNP for inviting me and WINS to this very, very important activity. Let me begin with a personal anecdote. Now I'm living in Vienna, but last time I recently moved here, but last time I was here in Vienna was for the Icons 2020. So that was nearly 2 years ago, right? We are like almost 2 years ago. And the world has changed a lot since last time we had that very, very important meeting. Somehow it feels like history is moving faster than time. The world, it's a different one. Of course, for the pandemic, but also for the recent events that we are all aware in the last week or in the last days. So somehow the challenge, like we were hearing all over the presentation, the challenge that we have ahead for this conference, it's a very, very important one, because at some point, is like we discussed many times, it is, and we all know, how we merge and somehow static instrument, legal instrument, with a very, very dynamic world where things are changing all the time. And when we begin, and Ambassador Elena was just addressing this, when we begin this process back when we co-chair the technical meetings with Dr. Floyd, with my good friend Rob, the world was a different one. So the very first challenge, or the very first things that I had to say on this regard is, how could this instrument be effective and be useful in a world when we have experienced that the worst things could actually happen? How can we get or keep this instrument up to date? Which actually takes me to another point that I would like to raise, which is the importance of implementation and how to actually measure the effectiveness of the physical protection measures. We will be in a meeting in 2 or 3 weeks' time, when we will hear a lot about, of course, physical protection and implementation, but all the time we have to think about how we are gonna, you as member states are gonna measure the implementation measures on physical protection and how effective they are. Also, it is very important, and we always say this, it is very important to keep an open dialogue and a constant dialogue with capitals. We always say the importance of talking to capitals, but also talking to the industry, talking to the nuclear operators, which are, in the end, the custodians of the nuclear material. They are the main implementers of the CPPNM. They are the people, the men and women on the ground, actually implementing all the things that we or you are going to discuss in 3 weeks. And that is a challenge, of course. Of course, as you can see on my logo right here, I am no longer representing the country that I am from, of course, but I come from a region in Latin America. I'm from Argentina, but I come from a region that somehow has a problem in my experience dealing with the threat. I always say the same thing. We always think that we are far away from conflicts and the threat is not real. So the problem or the challenge also here, when it comes to the discussions that we're going to have in 3 weeks, is how to actually keep, like we always say, the DBT updated, upgraded, how to keep the physical protection measures up to date and be able to address a world that is changing all the time, and it's changing, like I said before, faster than we actually anticipated, and how to actually enforce or assure that all the measures that member states are taking are adequate. And especially, like I said before, in some parts of the world where we perceive that the threat is not real. So the challenge will be how to actually make this, the CPPNM or the amended CPPNM enforce, or how can actually the CPPNM enforce measures and behaviors in those countries, in this, let's call it a post-pandemic world. And also something very important is that I would like to address also, it's the role that NGOs, the non-governmental organizations and international organizations have in this process. We as NGOs, and WINS in particular, we could help industry assess their physical protection measures. We can help industry and member states in the end to better implement the CPPNM, or at least know where we are, where they are. It is also important, these kind of events, Elena, and other events that different NGOs organize, to of course raise awareness, to get the industry, the implementers closer to the instrument, to the legal instrument. Somehow this community could be really far away from each other, and we could be here in Vienna talking about these things, and the people on the capitals implementing it might not be totally aware of what we are discussing. That's why WINS will organize a side event as well during the CPPNM review conference on strengthening the role of industry in implementing the obligations of the CPPNM. So you are more, this is me advertising our event, if you don't mind. This is, you are more than welcome to participate. And the last sentence that I will have to say, and again, thank you so much for having me and having us here, is again, how NGOs could help bridge governments, industries, and this instrument or legal instrument that is gonna have a new review form. And I think that we as NGOs have a role over there to help have a safe and secure world. Thank you so very much. I'm more than welcome to have any questions. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you, Tomas, and thank you also for putting together again the framework of how the current events and the overall evolving situation impacts the nuclear security and the convention and our discussions. And also thank you for mentioning the importance of industry and operators in the implementation of the convention and its amendment. I do hope that there is some room not only for some side events, but possibly part of the schedule of the conference where the role of industry and operators will be addressed. I know there is a session focused on the non-governmental organizations. There are a number of questions coming from the audience that are focused on the modalities and of the conference, and I will just ask some of them first and maybe direct them Ambassador Laggner and Ambassador Umar. But then there are questions about more about the outcome of the document of the review conference and some other issues. I will pose them to you. There are also many very technical questions, and I apologize to the audience that if not all of them will be addressed today, because I don't think we can solve them. That's maybe the conference itself will be focusing on. But before I do that, on the some of the modalities of the conference, one is about a session focused on the role of industry and operators, if there is a plan for that. The second question is coming about the access to the meeting itself virtually for those who are not able to come, and that I guess there is probably a distinction between the general public, the official delegations, and others. So maybe you could answer those questions first. Benno?
Okay, thank you, Elena. Well, we will have one session for interaction with non-governmental organizations. We have 14 that were approved. That is according to the rules of procedure. We had an opportunity for non-governmental organizations to indicate their interest. And then we had a silence procedure approving the participation of these NGOs. So they will be able to be present throughout most of the conference, not in the topical sessions, but throughout most of the conference. And then we will have one specific session for an interaction with the NGOs. Now, this is really up then to the NGOs, the 14, to see how they want to best organize that session, which was one of the purposes of the dialogue we had under your guidance or under you together with NDI, organizing this dialogue with the NGOs. So that may be an area where the role of industry and operators will come up, but we don't have anything specifically planned for industry or operators. And then, of course, during the side events, this issue will come up certainly in some of the side events. Now, regarding the access, I mean, this is a review conference of parties, so of states parties. We have states parties and we have Euratom as one of the parties to the convention and to the amendment. So this is not a conference that is open to the general public. It's not like a scientific conference. It's also not like the ICONS, which has a ministerial part, but then a sort of a very different part with different thematic panels. This is really a review conference for the parties. So the only participants will be the registered delegations from the parties to the amendment, the parties to the CPPNM only, non-parties, then the approved IGOs and NGOs. So, and there will only be a virtual possibility to listen to the proceedings for registered delegates from these categories of participants, but it is not a conference that is open to the general public.
Thank you, Ambassador Laggner. Ambassador Umar, would you like to add something, or we can move to the next question?
Whatever His Excellency has said is part of what we have observed. So virtually, I have nothing to add. Unless there is a specific question which you feel I should respond, then let me know, please.
Thank you so much. There are several comments and questions related to the views on the adequacy of the convention under the prevailing situation. And there are multiple questions. At least I will mention some of them. I don't know, as I mentioned, probably not necessarily in position to solve them now, but I'm sure there have been already discussions in the preparation for the review conference and discussions about the outcome document. And several of the participants posed the questions like, is cyber security is covered by the convention? Whether it is already part of the existing legal norms and obligations, or it needs to be added to the existing scope. There are some other questions related to maybe adjustments, amendments to take into account what has already been introduced in the important information circular focused on physical protection, insert 225, revision 5, with adding some of the materials like thorium. Whether the unaccounted for materials is already covered within the scope of the convention. And I don't know how much you want to address this document, these questions, or just in general say about how the conference is going to discuss some of these matters. I would really welcome your thoughts on that. Anyone would like to take the floor? Yes, no? Benno? Yes, please.
I don't want to be the only one attempting to answer the questions that have been asked, and I've seen in the Q&A we have a very lively audience with over 20 questions and some more in the chat. But no, I think first of all, I think we need to be clear what this conference is and is not. This is a review conference of the convention as amended. It is not an amendment conference. These are two separate things. There are also separate provisions in the convention as amendment regarding the review and the amendment. So we will not be changing anything in the convention as amended. I think this has to be very clear. And I think the question regarding whether this footnote in one of the annexes will be brought in line with INFCIRC 225, theoretically, there could be a recommendation to do this, but then that would have to be done through an amendment conference. So the other question on cyber, really, I think what we have seen also in the consultations is that, of course, there are differences among the parties how broadly they interpret the scope of the convention as amended. It says the convention on the physical protection, but what does physical protection encompass? So I think there are probably very different interpretations. I mean, we are in a dynamic environment, so there are those who argue that we need to take a broader view and we need to look at the convention within this dynamic environment. And then, of course, new developments may be included if we do not take a too literal reading of the wording of the convention as amended. So, but there are different views on this among the parties. Certainly, it will come up in statements. We would expect it to come up in statements. But again, also, the review conference is not there to interpret. We're not going to agree on a common interpretation of the convention as amended. It's really to review the implementation and the adequacy. And one of the key things is to come to an agreement on the adequacy. Do we all agree that the convention as amended is adequate? I think that is probably the key outcome, or one of the key outcomes, alongside the issue of future conferences that has been addressed by Corinne, that will have to be looked at and somehow reflected also in the outcome document.
Thank you, Benno. I think that answers a lot of questions, because there are even more technical questions on the scope of the convention and the role of the review conference in addressing the scope. There is a very good, interesting comment related to what the discussion we started, coming from Kenneth Brill, former ambassador to the IA. And the question starts with, first of all, your thoughts on and he thinks that the first review conference on the amended CPPNM needs to establish a template for a clear process of regular substantive reviews of whether the amended convention is adequate in light of the then prevailing situation throughout its entire cycle, not just once. I think that's one of the comments that he makes, and he points to other successful treaties that have similar arrangements, including the Nuclear Safety Convention, Montreal Protocol for the protection of the ozone layer, and so that there is an established review process in these conventions. And he specifically asks that whether panelists could comment on such a template that could be established by the first review conference. And within that, first committing to substantive review conferences at regular intervals, which could include preparatory meetings before the review conference. Second, establishing an assistance mechanism to support parties needed help meeting their convention obligations, most likely via the International Atomic Energy Agency, which would also help to attract more states to adhere to the convention. And three, the substantive review would include assessment of the convention continuing adequacy in light of changing technology and or threats, and a process for making approving any of these needed changes. So I think it's a very good question. And I may ask you to give your assessment, maybe more in your kind of capacity, your national capacities. And if I may, maybe Thomas, we can start with you. I saw you really nodding your head, and then maybe I'll ask Ambassador Corinne, Kitsell, and others to comment on it as well. Tomas?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Of course, I this will not be on my national capacity because that is not my case. But I think it's all the comments that were raised in that question or comment are absolutely important. I think that, I mean, this review conference will pass. It will be great. Our both great ambassadors will take us there, and it's gonna be very good. And we will have probably a review conference or review tool or adequate. We will decide that it's adequate. But I think that another important thing that it will teach us is a process. Somehow, and the previous speakers, my colleagues, were talking about this. We were creating something in a blank, in a white page, right? And it will give us a process. We were very creative. We were trying to design that template. We started having those discussions back on the technical and legal meetings. Countries all around the world had interpret how is to actually review the implementation and the adequacy with different realities, different threats, different cultures, different languages, different everything. So I think that one of the most important things for nuclear security as a global community is that this process will give us a clear path on how to actually review an important document, and perhaps, like we always say, the only legally binding document. So I think that it will be a great place to have a very energetic discussions like we had all through the process, because in the end, the outcome will be a new path for nuclear security as a global community. Thank you. Thank you so much for that comment.
Thank you. Ambassador Kitsell, would you like to comment on Campbell's question?
Sure. I mean, I guess you wouldn't be surprised to hear that the UK tends to take a fairly pragmatic approach to these sorts of things. And for this convention, as for any sort of multilaterally agreed instrument, it's clearly important that these things stay relevant. And I suppose that's becoming tougher in a world where technology moves ever faster. So, we can all spend years negotiating something, and then obviously new things come along that change the picture. But we also have to recognize the huge challenges of negotiating anything. And I guess we may find, particularly with the timing of this review conference, that it's going to be quite a strained atmosphere, internationally. And clearly, as we unfortunately see in a wide variety of areas here in Vienna, where we are trying to have conversations about things that are essentially technical and are global benefits, things can very quickly become politicized. So I guess my pragmatism would also extend to sort of a degree of realism about what this RevCon is for, what's achievable in the time available. And of course, again, the UK tends to be at the sort of ambitious end of the spectrum. So I suppose I would say we would want this to stay relevant. We would certainly see it as an iterative process, but we wouldn't see this RevCon as something that sort of covers all of those issues and draws us into a huge negotiation about a sort of future pattern. It's probably just not realistic, actually, at this particular point in time. But I mean, we'll see, I guess. But it is important to kind of keep things relevant. And so, generally speaking, the UK take a pragmatic approach. But as Benno set out, this conference, has a clearly defined remit and a full agenda. So we have to be realistic about what could possibly be achieved this time around. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone would like to add to the discussion, or I can move to the next question? If you're happy to chime in, just unmute yourself or raise your hand. Don't see the volunteers. Next question. Actually, I'm gonna ask two questions and see maybe some of you could tackle one question and some the other. As already was started in our original remarks, our expectations about the outcome document. What could be in the outcome document, your views on both the substance of these documents, the issues that probably will be part of the outcome document, but also how important is to not how important, how do you see the success of the conference itself? So it's like an outcome document is only part of it, but how do you view the success of the conference? What it constitutes in your views? A separate question is coming from actually one of the participants in past recent VCDNP course, and also a member of WINS, who is representing his mission here in Vienna. And the question is more about the universalization and how to improve the adherence to the convention, but in a very specific angle. In the technical community that works in nuclear security, the diplomats here in Vienna understand the importance, but then the treaty accession documents go to Parliament, and then they are stuck there for a long time. So what could be done in improving awareness raising and outreach to parliamentarians on the importance of ratification and adherence to the convention? So these two questions, one on the outcome document and the outcome of the conference itself, your views, and the other one on the raising awareness in different kind of among different stakeholders, but particularly on the parliamentarians. And let me start with the first question, and I will, or with somebody who raises her hand. I see more Ambassador Sriswasdi wants to start. Morakot, please.
Thank you. I was just about to try to answer the second questions, because I think for us, we have quite an experience with in defending the Nuclear Act and many other instruments with the parliamentarian. It is very important to raise awareness, and I think for the situations that are happening at present, it might be an opportunity to explain how importance of this convention, of the amendment, of these. I mean, I think the how to raise awareness for the politician. You need to bring down the reality, the fact, and sometimes you have to contrast with the truth. So it's a fact and truth that both are important, but you have to contrast the fact and truth, and explain. Persistence is something that is very important, that you have to outreach, you have to work with your implementing agencies in coordinated manner to explain to the members of parliament of how important, and make use of the present situation to maybe it helps to explain. So this is something that I would like to share, because sometimes, you know, they have different priorities at the parliament. So my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Sriswasdi, particularly given that this is a recent experience for your country. It's even more valuable. Anyone would like to take the floor next, please, Ambassador Laggner.
On the specific question of parliamentarians, I just wanted to mention that one of the NGOs that will be participating in the conference is Parliamentarians for Global Action. So they will be participating. So I think it will be an excellent opportunity to maybe also explore with them, or for some of the parties, also to explore with them how they can assist in these activities. And then, of course, there is another body called the Interparliamentary Union, which also now has an observer here in Vienna. So also maybe approach this organization. But PGA, Parliamentarians for Global Action, will be at the conference. Maybe just a few words on your first question. Really, again, as I mentioned, the core thing that has to be in the outcome document is a determination on the adequacy. That's a mandate that we have from Article 16.1. We have to express ourselves on this. And then, of course, it's an opportunity to highlight the work, for example, of the IEA, the different instruments we have, like IPAS missions, nuclear security guidance, all these different issues. And then, of course, also a few words on the general context within which this convention is being placed. But I think I'll leave it there, because this is really something that the parties themselves have to come forward with the proposals they want to have included. We, as the co-presidents, are only the facilitators of this discussion.
Thank you. Tomas or Corinne, please go ahead.
Thank you. I mean, I set some of this out in my initial comments, but I mean, as far as we see it, there's a real benefit here in a conference that brings states together to share their experiences and their expertise on how to implement the convention. So, I mean, frankly, of course, we've all seen over the last 2 years a lot of conferences that haven't happened. And I think just the actual business of these things finally happening and bringing people together, for us, the importance of it being a multi-stakeholder dialogue, as we've talked about, and just heard an excellent example from Benno on where bringing in expertise from outside of governments, you know, actually has an advantage, because certainly one of the things we would like to see is, you know, this review conference as an opportunity to enhance universalization. And I think, you know, we also have to be realistic that for governments around the world over the last couple of years, bandwidth for this sort of thing has been limited. You know, obviously COVID has affected the way parliaments operate, but also there are all sorts of huge global challenges going on at the moment, which mean capacity has been really constrained in a lot of places. And making use of non-governmental stakeholders who may have capacity to do this sort of work, I think, is a good idea. And as I said in my introductory remarks, we do think that it is an opportunity to agree some sort of future review process, because we need to, and as I said, we need to ensure that the convention does remain adequate and up to date and responds to future threats and to the sort of evolution of technologies and so on. So we would like to see some sort of regular cycle in the future, you know, and obviously we've got sort of models for that kind of thing that we can draw on. Thanks.
Thank you, Tomas. I saw your hand before. And Ambassador Umar, if you also plan to speak, let me know.
You want to go ahead, Ambassador, please?
Oh, go ahead after you.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for that, Ambassador. I would like to make a few comments, and thank you for those very important questions. When it comes to the Parliament or the Congress question, I think it's, of course, it depends on domestic politics, as we all know. But I think that recent news, at least from Latin America region, can taught us that the process is hard, but eventually you can get there. I mean, I think that even though it is very hard to go through Congress with this ratification, I think it's worth the effort, and the outcome, it can be very, very, very good. Also, I think like the NSS process, like the ICONS conference, this is a very, very important conference. And also, let's be honest, it's one of the most important conferences that we will have, of course, this year, also with the MPT review conference, but all through these years, this is one of the most important review conference. So this is a way for national or government officials to try to do their efforts to put this topic on the table of decision makers, to raise awareness. And finally, I think that going to the first question, to the outcome, I think that the importance of having an outcome is a very important outcome itself. So have some sort of agreement, it's a very good outcome. But also, like I tried to say before, the importance of building a path for a future review conference. This will create this sort of routine of reviewing our international agreements. But also something important is we don't have to wait until the next review conference to start thinking, or member states to start thinking of the status of the implementation. We can rely on regional meetings, on NGOs again, to help us, or to help member states actually go through the process, which is I don't want to say a painful process, but it's a complex process of reviewing the physical protection measures, or the national physical protection measures of nuclear material, even though the next review conference it's in 5 or X years. So I think that relying on regional working groups and NGOs as a facilitator could actually help be more effective than the actual outcome of the conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tomas, for your comments and for your suggestions. Ambassador Umar, I thought you wanted to take the floor, but also wanted to let you know there a lot of your countrymen are following the webinar today.
Yes.
And there is a special greetings to you from Ambassador Vivian Okeke, who was previously the ambassador here in Austria. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. On the last question, what do we expect to achieve from this review conference? To some of us, the conference itself is an avenue for countries to share their experiences. And in addition, we are living in a dynamic world where there are new things, emerging issues happening. Just recently, in our doorsteps here, in our backyard, more or less, backyard of Europe, there are issues. And it is through this event or conferences that some of these issues will be addressed, analyzed, and then maybe focus on the next years to come. So whatever countries or parties to the conference feel should be the elements that should be contained in the outcome document are those things that may be there, and then those may not be acceptable to everybody. But in the spirit of consensus, it will be there to serve as a guide towards the next review meeting or conference. On universalization, it is an issue that is dependent on countries. Again, what is universal to one region might not be universal to another region. But those countries who apply it or who try to apply it might think certain provisions there in the convention are universal or adequate, or that some might think otherwise. But the essence of this review conference is for, like I said earlier, for those countries to share and then see where we can arrive at a meeting point. Meeting point in the sense that we will attempt, or they will attempt, those who will be, or those who are the practitioners will attempt to see where there are needs for amendment or otherwise. And where we feel there is need for amendment, then countries might agree to disagree. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Umar. The time of we're getting close to the end of the webinar, and I want to summarize a few things and, if necessary, give you floor for final remarks if you wish to take it. There was a very good comment in the Q&As about that the importance of the convention and its review conference is extremely valid, particularly in our approach and our desire to take benefits of what peaceful uses of nuclear science and technology offer. This is an important moment to reconfirm the importance of nuclear security for the continuing use of benefits of these technologies. The other comments that are in the chat and in the questions that are posed, some of them maybe are related more to the current situation and the conflict in Ukraine. And some go beyond even talk about nuclear weapons. Just want to remind listeners that the convention addresses first and foremost materials in the peaceful uses and civilian materials. It does not cover nuclear weapons. And I think the convention, the review conference, and overall at the IAEA, we will all be looking at how various conventions, treaties, and legal instruments actually address a situation when we have a military conflict and facilities. And I don't think we're not there, we're as a community not there yet. We can voice our disagreement and discontent with what's happening, but there needs to be a very serious analysis in terms of which instruments do apply in that situation of the armed conflict, and which facilities and which specific norms could be engaged in this regard. And with that, I'm really happy to give the floor to any one of our panelists if they wish to say the final words before we close the webinar. No? Tomas, Ambassador Umar, Benno, Morakot?
No, I mean,
Benno?
yeah, Benno.
Just really one final remark on the issue of future conferences. There are, as we have seen in the consultations, different views among the parties on when we should have next conference, whether we should have regular conferences and so on. I just wanted to mention that the convention itself provides a mechanism for future conferences, Article 16.2, which says that a majority of parties to the convention as amended can request a conference. To be an interval of at least 5 years. So it's really in the hands of the parties. If a majority deposits a request with the Director General as depository, then a follow-up conference will be convened.
Thank you. That's a very good clarification, Ambassador Laggner. On my behalf, I really want to thank you all for finding time today. I know many of you are very pressed for time, given the ongoing IE Board of Governors and other pressing issues. I also want to wish our co-presidents and all state parties for a successful review conference. We appreciate your work and look forward to contribute. I'm sure WINS and VCDNP and other non-governmental organizations would continue to be engaged in the CPPNM and nuclear security issues and in the conference itself. So please let us know how we can better do our job in both raising awareness or assisting the effective implementation of the convention. But with that, I want to thank also our listeners who joined us today and wish everybody a good remaining of their day. And for us, our next webinar at the VCDNP to be held in a peaceful global environment and in a different situation. Thank you all. And with that, we'll close the webinar.